because don't know. And then you went back to Michigan, so I wonder, was it Arizona too hot for you? Or why did you decide to change?
That was one of my wonderful grad students, Juanita, wrote that, and it was kind of like a running joke. So I would say that Arizona was definitely too hot for me, though. Man, I just used to get sunburned like through my clothing. I was like, I don't know, I'm so impressed by people who do field work in places like Arizona. It's intense. And especially now, I mean, they barely have any water. I feel like it's an extreme living circumstance, although incredibly beautiful. I did appreciate the mountains, the desert. But yeah, it wasn't, I mean, having grown up in the north, I was
Yes,
too much
yes, because
sun,
in
man.
fact, yes, I read that you mentioned cold in your description, so I said, oh, maybe it was too hot for her. And well, I see that you have plenty of research about polistes wasps, so I wonder if you decided to work with wasps, or were they who decided to, were
Yeah, it
they?
was just Yeah, it was just random chance. So, I was applying to graduate schools and I applied to a few different places. And, in different places, people were studying different things. I had worked on birds as an undergrad briefly, and the project I was doing involved, we had to get the birds to re-nest. So we bled the chicks and then murdered them. And I was like, oh, because I was maybe a little bit more of an animal lover at that time. Not that I don't love animals now, but I was less hardened than I am these days. And I was like, wow, I am totally not going to study a vertebrate. I want to study something like an insect where when I kill them, I don't feel quite as guilty. So then I looked around and, social insects are the coolest, right? Um, at least there's a lot more research on them than some other insects. And so I decided, so I thought social insects were cool, although I applied to some programs where the faculty were studying non-social insects. And then I ended up going to Cornell, and there were two people in the department. One studied bees and one studied wasps. And I was like, people have been studying bees for so long, there's probably nothing left to discover. So I'm going to study wasps instead. Now, of course, I realize, like, in retrospect, that's kind of a silly, naive thing to say. Like, of course, there's so much to discover in any organism. But at the time, that was my not very sophisticated reasoning. So that I've been studying wasps ever since. Because, now, of course, I like them a lot.
Yes. So, Natasha, please.
Yeah, because you mentioned pain in insects, did you see this recent study about nociception in bees? I think the ethics requirements are going to change for us social insects people.
So tell me more about this study. Is that tell me more about it?
Actually, Matilda Gibbons is giving a talk about it during our conference. She's scheduled tomorrow. Yeah, at 8:10. It's a bit early for you, I think, but you can watch the replay.
I will. Yeah, that sounds interesting. No, I agree. So, the more we learn about insects, the more we learn that they're pretty sophisticated. And you're right. I do feel guilty occasionally for murdering insects in such large numbers. I mean, they certainly experience a lot of the same things that vertebrates do, right?
Yes, yes. It's not easy.
We're all guilty.
Yeah, I think. So, I wonder, was it difficult to move back to Michigan? I mean, in terms of work, did you already have something, your position, the job offer, or something like that when you decided to go back?
Yeah, I'd been hired as an assistant professor when I went back to Michigan. I think it is a little awkward because I guess I've been gone for like 7 years, but a lot of the faculty that taught me when I was an undergrad were still there as faculty. And, that's a little bit awkward to suddenly be colleagues with people who you'd learned from as an undergrad. it seemed to freak some of them out because, you know, in Michigan, the classes are huge, right? So you have like hundreds of students in your lecture, and mostly if I didn't work closely with them, they had no idea who I was. So I guess that made it a little easier that it was such a big class. I can imagine it's hard to go back to an institution, like a place where you did grad school, where you know the faculty much more closely, and then come back as a faculty member. I can imagine that that would be a little bit trickier. Yeah.
Yes, and how, after you were established as a professor or in Michigan, like how long did it took you to get your first funding for research? Was it
Yeah,
difficult?
so getting funding, man, so hard. It took me a really long time. So so when I was in grad school, I started studying individual recognition, like face recognition in these WASPs. And then I continued doing that during my postdoc and since in various ways. But there were some people who were like, oh no, WASPs don't have face recognition. And so for many years, whenever I would apply for a grant, there would be at least one review that said, oh no, she's totally wrong. WASPs don't have facial recognition at all. And so I couldn't get funding. It was awful, you know? I mean, I'm sure there were other things involved, but it was really hard to see those reviews and being like, but come on, like you just are saying that you don't actually like, you know, have any evidence. But I guess I eventually wore people down, and then I was successful in getting funding.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, it's tough for sure.
And it was very important, the discovery, the study was very important. So,
Yeah.
Evie, please.
So, you know, I wouldn't say like there was real difficulty. I just think that, you know, it's some young women who look young are sometimes not taken that as seriously. And I think that can be especially true if they knew you when you were like 18 and literally didn't know anything. It's hard to remember. I mean, you know something, but you hopefully learn a lot during your PhD and postdoc. So I think it can be a little bit harder for them to consider you like a colleague and take you seriously. I think that's probably a common feeling that people have when they start as a professor. And part of it is like your own self. You're like, oh my God, how was anyone taking me seriously? Yeah. But, you know, you just have to remember that the reason people hired you is because they're excited about your work and excited about what you're going to do. So you got to have that, I don't know, positive energy, believe in yourself. So getting funding, I mean, it is, I think, the hardest part of our job. I mean, in every country, there are problems. The problems vary, certainly. And I don't know, I think that my advice there is, one, you got to start practicing early and a lot, right? I mean, I'm sure that people know this. I didn't quite know that. My PhD advisor had some funding and he's like, you don't need money. I'll just pay for the $5 you need to like buy a video camera. You know, like literally it was just like toothpicks and paint and some video cassettes because it wasn't even digital then. But, you know, in retrospect, that was not maybe the wisest choice because I should have been practicing writing grants at that time.
That's nice. And so, talking about writing about grants, how do you spend time writing for grants as a part of your job or also as part of your personal life?
As part of my personal life? What do you mean?
Outside of you, I mean, in
Oh.
your free time or things like that.
Well, I mean, I try to have some personal life. I have a couple of kids and they require a lot of attention. So, you know, there's certain periods where you have to work pretty hard, but I would say it's important to have a division between your home and personal life and not just write grants all the time. You know, writing, I'm sure that people will get lots of different advice about writing grants. For me, I learned, so I tend to be more successful the first time I write something. Like there are a lot of proposals that I've gotten funded immediately, and then a lot of proposals that I thought were amazing, and I would turn them in and I would get reviews and I'd be like, oh, I can make the changes that the reviewers think. And then I would revise them and turn them in again. And then I get some other reviews. And I think over time, this is probably not universally true, but I think over time I've decided that there's some ideas and preliminary data that are just super cool and people are into them and you can get them funded more easily. And then there are other ideas, like even if they're really solid and you think they're cool, they're just probably never going to make it. So yeah, so I guess I've learned to be more cutthroat with my ideas, like try them out and be like, all right, that one's not going to fly, I'm going to do a new one. And then also, like, when you get back reviews on proposals, sometimes people just aren't that into it. And so they give you comments like, well, I don't know if your sample size is big enough. And how about this alternative? And you're like, oh, that's so easy. I could change that. And then you change it and they don't like it any better. And I think they're just looking for something to be picky about because they kind of just aren't into it. So I guess like reading between the lines and thinking about, like, you want an idea that just like bowls people over as much as possible. Or like has something super cool about it, like a robot, you know? Not saying that you need to do robots, but I feel like there's so many proposals and they're all so good. And if you have something like a robot, just as an example, many other things could fit this bill. Everyone's like, whoa, isn't that a cool robot? And then it gives them something to talk about and, like, you know, helps you get over the top.
Please, Alexis.
Yeah, thank you. So our attendance is mainly, I mean, a big part are students. And I mean, we know that at this stage of the career, like we always have some doubt about if we want to continue and if we want to like actually go until really an academic position. I was wondering if you remember at what moment of your study or of your career you were able to say, okay, this is what I want to do now. This is where I'm going and where I will put all my energy.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's like there is a lot of self-doubt, and it makes sense because it is unfortunately a pretty competitive career. Well, I would say during my postdoc, I definitely had a big crisis of confidence. I'm like, what have I done? I have no skills. Like, all I know how to do is paint wasps. Like, who is going to hire me? Yeah. And I definitely was like, okay, so what other careers should I be looking for? What other skills should I be getting? But then I got a job at the University of Michigan and I'm like, all right, let's do it. Let's see how it goes. But so I would say everyone has crises of confidence for sure. I would say in retrospect, what I wish I would have done differently during my PhD is to think a little bit more about, I just didn't think about careers. I'm like, these wasps are cool. Here I am doing this cool stuff. And I probably should have been a little bit more thoughtful about all the potential careers that I could pursue and getting some other skills. So if academia didn't work out, that would be possible. And fortunately for us, a lot of us are, you know, learning skills in programming or genomics or I don't know, God knows what else. And those skills are really transferable to other careers. But I think it does make sense to think a little bit about that before I was in the position of needing a job and being like, oh my God, I don't know how to do anything.
Thanks. Natasha, please.
Yeah, so I have 3 questions regarding everything you said just now. The first one was regarding what you said just before. Do you think only sexy science could get funded?
Well, no, but it is a lot easier for sure. Yeah. And I know it depends a lot on the funding agency, and, you know, different countries have different systems, right? And they're looking for different kinds of things, and different, you know, calls for proposals are looking for different things. So I wouldn't say it's completely universal. But the problem is, you know, I'm just speaking to the US National Science Foundation. They get a lot of proposals, maybe like 5 to 10% get funded in behavior. And that's a really small number. So you can't just fund all the good science. They're not funding all the good science. So you need something that stands out from everyone else, and like a robot or something else, right? If it's just like, wow, that's like a really useful study, it's less likely to make it. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think only sexy science gets funded in your experience?
I think I agree with you. It's definitely easier to get funding if your science is sexy, because it has a higher impact for society as well. We can see that sexy science attracts people that are not necessarily scientists. It gets their attention. So I guess that's how it works. I don't know.
Alexis, do you want to add something?
Yeah, no, just at the same time, I mean, more than sexy, I have the feeling it's a question of trend also, in the sense that maybe sometimes it's not so sexy, but just you don't really, sometimes you do not understand why people absolutely want to focus on one thing. But like, for instance, if let's take any subject that is done on honeybees and done on wasp, it's not more sexy in on one of the model, but funny enough, it will be easier to get money for the honeybees, I guess, because it's more trendy because of ecology and things like this. So I have the thing, it's a mix of trend and sexy. But I don't know.
I totally agree with you. Like, yeah, there are different trends going through, and you can see a lot of people get successful. Like, oh, epigenetics, I could get funded if I do epigenetics, or I don't know what the flavor of the month is for sure. So paying attention to those trends is definitely another way to success.
Amanda, do you want to add something?
No, I had a separate question. So Natasha can finish
Yeah.
her other 2, and then I'll jump in after.
Okay, the second question was about the skills you mentioned, because that's a worry of mine. I don't have any programming skills. And I know it's really trendy now, and the new generations are really skilled. And I feel like I'm old now and late in the game. So what are your advice regarding this?
Well, I'm not good to give you advice because I don't have any programming skills, and it's, you know, I've survived. I guess what I'm just saying is, like, you know, they're different ways of being successful, right? And everyone has their own niche, right? And some people are successful in multiple ways. Like, someone has an amazing system, and someone is just great at like staying on the cutting edge of great ideas, and someone else has like amazing programming skills. And I guess it doesn't necessarily matter as long as you figure out what niche works for you. And in terms of getting non-academic jobs, I guess thinking about the marketable transferable skills you're getting. And I just picked out programming because that's something that a lot of people get. But I'm sure you're getting other skills, like you're a great writer, you know, at this point, and that's, you know, a great transferable skill too. I don't know.
I just wanted to add about that when, well, it was, I think that some people also had the same feeling in my area, that when after the Human Genome Project started and everyone had money to sequence, like, I thought that molecular work was like super sexy for many people because there were plenty of projects supported, or there was plenty of money to sequence genomes and to do a lot of things, and that involved also to know bioinformatics, which is a totally different language that as a research, if you want to do that, you will need to learn bioinformatics. But it's for me, it's weird, like sometimes when you see the posts for postdocs or for people who works with bioinformatics, they don't even need formation about biology. It says like, oh, it's preferable. But I mean, it's like, I think that it's good to have a balance, but of course that I understand that it's not possible, for example, right now for someone who is older maybe to learn this. But I think that in this point, collaborations are very important. So yes, that it's thinking about that sometimes some research areas are more, don't know, attractive to some funding companies.
sure.
Don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Like that some things are more marketable now. And if you look at what jobs are out there, there are certain areas where there are a lot more openings than other areas, right? Like, I don't know, Evo Devo, everyone was hiring that. That's old school now, but at one time it was exciting. I know my department was all into microbial ecology. We're like, wow, what's like a cool new idea? And like there's a lot of complex systems now. So they're, like people said, they're different trends. And if you have those skills, then it can be a lot easier to get a job. I mean, I try, like I said, literally, like my PhD was like watching things on videotape. Like I had no skills, and I do try to try not to have my students graduate with absolutely no skills. Like it did work out, but I think it's important to think about your niche. Like when you're applying to jobs, you can be more successful, if, like I said, if there's something when you give your job talk or you write your statements where everyone's like, huh, that's cool, just like the proposal thing, right? And if you have something about your application that's just like unique and exciting, then it's easier.
Yeah.
Or like you said, if you manage to be in the cutting edge area that everyone is hiring in right at that moment.
Mm-hmm. And now Amanda, please.
I think Natasha had one more. I remember you
And
said
one
3
more
questions.
about.
It's okay, you can go, Amanda, I can ask.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I wanted to go back to when you had mentioned sort of that transition period where you were, even if you were thinking about like a job outside of academia, you're like, oh my gosh, like as you said, I have no skills, where should I apply to? What jobs did you consider? Because when I was kind of doing a transition, I remember, because I worked with zebrafish, and I feel like even if you want to leave research to pursue something else, when you have those lower model organisms that you studied, like I feel like if you have rodent as your organism of research, there's so many other opportunities outside of academia and like the medical field and everything. But since I studied sort of a lower model organism, I was like, where do I even go outside of academia? So did you consider any avenues, or did you sort of get the position before you had to go to that?
What did you consider? Can I ask you that?
Yeah, I looked into like scientific writing. I kind of wanted to do like editing and writing because I loved the writing and the editing aspect. So that's kind of what I started looking at. I was also looking into getting into like, medical research kind of stuff outside of the field of academia, because I was kind of lucky in that zebrafish are sort of making their way into the medical field, but a lot of the job applications would specify, need experience with either cell cultures or rodents, which I had neither. So
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess I was interested in scientific writing too. I had a 3-year postdoc and I got the job after my 2nd year, so I had not completely panicked yet, and I hadn't pursued alternative careers probably as strongly. I mean, the people I knew in grad school, they have positions like in the federal government, like the Forest Service and the USDA, or they have positions in nonprofits. A lot of them are like directors of nonprofits. That seems to be weirdly big. And then positions like everywhere from community college, like undergrad institutions, like all sorts of different academic institutions. I would say that was most common, the people I knew.
Yeah, the writing, the as you said, the nonprofit and the conservation, I think, are kind of the big ones I came across as well.
Yeah.
Great, awesome, thank you.
We don't hear you, Kenzie.
Oh.
Sorry, Alexis, please.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I wanted to come back. So Kenzie talked about collaboration, and I mean the need of making collaboration to be able to touch some area that you don't have skills for. I was wondering, like, what's your opinion about the evolution of collaboration since you started? Like, do you have the feeling that it's getting harder to build collaboration between labs, in the sense that, since, as we said at the very beginning, it's a very competitive world. Do you have the feeling that it make collaboration harder?
Well, I would say that I'm not. I definitely have had a lot of wonderful, successful collaborations, but there are some people who really, like, all the work they do is like in big collaborative groups. And you sometimes see someone having like a really great skill, and then they collaborate with lots and lots of other people using that skill, right? And I think it's a great successful strategy. That is not my strategy, because I don't have skills, right? I only have ideas. So yeah, I've approached a lot of people over the years to say, hey, I have this idea, can't do it, you want to collaborate? And it's been great, right? People have basically always been very excited to collaborate, and I've had a lot of great experiences. I will say that I tend to collaborate with women, like probably more than men. I'm not sure if that's on purpose or not, but most of my collaborations have been with other women.
And well, talking about collaborations, I wonder, how do you go about finding new collaborations? I mean, it is through networking at conferences, or when do you find when do you look for the appropriate situations?
Yeah, conferences are great, of course. You go to talks, you see someone talk about some amazing thing that you think that you can use, and then you chat with them in a coffee break or set up a lunch meeting. I agree, that's a really great way of doing it. Or just like random conversations at conferences are a great way to get to know people. And even if you don't collaborate with them immediately, you can kind of like, set up some ideas for down the road. But I also sometimes do it just by like being like, okay, this is a skill. I need someone with this particular skill set. So I start looking through the literature to see who has that skill set, who's published recently, and just email them out of the blue, hey, here's my idea, and you want to talk. And, it's more successful than you might imagine. I think people tend to be excited about that, right? It's a great opportunity for everyone.
Oh, great tip. Thank you.
Yeah.
Please, Abby.
I'm curious about all of your opinions on that, because I feel like things are changing, right? Well, I think that face-to-face can be very effective, but also in some of these face-to-face meetings, it's huge, right? There's so many people there, and you don't always form a bunch of quality connections. And it can be hard when you're an early career scientist to be like, oh my God, there are like 1,000 people I don't know here. Like, what the heck am I supposed to do? I think that it's really useful to make connections with people at your own career stage. I think, you know, the people that you talk to now who are graduate students are going to be your colleagues forever. And I think sometimes people are like, oh, what I need to do when I go to meetings is just talk to like the most famous people I can find. And although that kind of works, it's harder because the people who are the most famous are talking to lots of people and they're going to be less likely to remember you. So I guess in going to conferences as a junior person, I would say just have fun, don't put a lot of pressure on yourself, and talk with as many different people at as many different career stages as you feel up to. And that will yield a lot of benefits through your whole career. It's not just like one, you know, meeting. In terms of virtual, I don't know. I mean, I feel like virtual conferences, I mean, this is such a great idea, right? It allows people to get together in ways that wouldn't be possible, cheaper, easier for your family, lower carbon footprint. I was the Animal Behavior Society program officer the year that COVID first hit, and we transitioned to virtual. And I remember it being like, it was kind of an ordeal, right? But I would say that I felt like it was more successful than people would have thought otherwise. But I agree with you, forming connections is a little bit more difficult. So, I mean, I'd love to hear what you all think about how to make those connections easier in virtual conferences.
Yes. And well, now talking about your, I will ask one question before you guys, I'm sorry. Now talking about your lab, what are some tools that you have found useful in running the lab? For example, catalogs or central repository of programming, don't know.
I don't even know how to answer that. Some tools that I found helpful. I mean, I think in like running my lab, I would say the hardest part of running a lab is you gotta having a successful group that works together. That's really important. And we're not taught that much about managing people in this field. So I would say that something that's been really helpful for me is, you know, are moving towards creating mentoring plans, like talking with people about what they feel like will help them be most successful, and coming up with like an agreement of how you work together. I think that's really helpful. Because I think, like, I don't know, one of the most important things in starting your own lab is getting the right people and having them work together well. And without that, there's not much else. Like the technical stuff doesn't matter as much as that.
Yes, so. And I read in your lab website that you propose now a Zoom meeting for prospective students. I think that is part of, because before it was not common to do that. So usually you just write an email and things like that. But now with this, I think that it you can see how people, their facial eye gestures and all a series of things that you can now have a better idea of yes, an idea of how the student is, or don't know about.
Yeah, it's hard. It's like a multi-year marriage, and you have to, like, you know, form that you decide whether you're going to go for it after not that much interaction. Yeah, so I like to meet with people, and then of course before they apply, I talk to people before they apply, and then, you know, there's interviews, and then my students, like you said, are having a Zoom meeting for prospective students, and they're like, we're going to be working with them for years, so we want to see them too and have our chance to provide some thoughts, which I agree is smart. It's hard.
Yes, I think it's nice and a good idea. And I'm sorry, it was the next Alexis, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to jump on that because you say that you would be interested to know our opinion about the virtual conference. I will say after 3 years, like, we can definitely say that it's quite welcome and people are quite happy about it. But if I had to tell one limitation of the virtual conference right now and virtual seminar and all of this, is that I have the feeling that we kind of created maybe a Netflix system of conference, kind of. And so somehow maybe people are starting to get lost, or even worse, do not have any desire to watch anything because there's too many choices. So I will say that it's maybe the only limitation that right now I'm seeing to it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Like on one hand, it's amazing because it's all there and you can watch it. And on the other hand, you're like, man, how many can you really get through? You know? I hear you. I'm not sure what the right solution there. When you go to a conference, you miss things like inevitably, and somehow, you know, because you can't see everything.
Yeah, I'm not sure that there is actually, and I mean, like the fact is that I will say that if every event were free like ABL is, it's not such a big deal somehow because you can just let's say accumulate and watch the thing that you want. But as soon as it involves some fees, obviously, like you always arrive to this level that everyone cannot have access to what they want. So like, yeah, I don't know. I think at this level there's no really real solution to bypass this limitation.
I mean, there's honestly just too much cool science, which I don't know what to do about that. I mean, yay, good for us.
Yeah.
But the figuring out how to get like, because I feel like networking is really important for all career stages, especially junior people, and like figuring out how to do that most effectively in virtual conferences, I feel like maybe is something we're still figuring out.
Yeah, I mean, I have the feeling that maybe at some point there will be some, let's say, fusion of different virtual event and things like this. That will help to not have so many choices. But yeah, I guess it will. I mean, like every collaboration, I guess it will take time because it's still quite new.
Yeah. So Amanda, do you have, or is it Natasha?
Oh yeah, I'll jump in. I was gonna bring it back to the like how to run a virtual conference as well. I was gonna make like a joke of like, you know, you use cool backgrounds like this and, you know, get people when they come on be like, oh wow, everyone's in chairs. But the like actual feedback was, I guess one of the main points is kind of like take each year and, you know, get feedback and then change it the next year, because as Alexi said, it's so new and I guess no one's really exactly clear on how to run these virtual events the best way possible. So I think it's one of the main things is, yeah, getting feedback from the participants. So, you know, what would you like to see next year or what didn't work? So I think it's just having that flexibility in like year to year and sticking with it, because definitely the transition at the beginning was difficult. So just sticking with the technical issues and all that stuff.
If I can add in, like for instance, like during our seminar series, we implemented something that would not be so possible in person. I think is that the PI is actually presenting with the postdoc and PhD student of the lab. So it's a kind of it's a big presentation in which they are just giving them the floor step by step, and it's I mean, like all of this I think will bring novelty and possibilities of maybe highlighting a little bit more early career, and obviously like even for the PI it's quite a new exercise. So like Amanda said, it's a lot of new things that we have to adapt all the time. But I think it's a quite cool challenge that, I mean, unfortunately, it was not cool to have COVID, but it kind of bring interesting new challenge to science, I will say.
Yeah, I totally agree, right? I feel like the advantages of virtual conferences for like different career stages, undergraduates who just aren't going to be traveling to a big conference or international. I mean, I agree. It's like a big opportunity. So hopefully we'll keep using what we learned.
Yeah. Please, Natasha.
Yeah, obviously social interactions are a big drawback of virtual conferences, but I feel like when it comes to collaboration, we don't necessarily have to collaborate with the other end of the world. Obviously, it's a really cool thing to do, but already in your university, you can collaborate with people from different disciplines and do interdisciplinary work, and that's already something that's really cool. Maybe when you're a PI, you already have collaborated with everyone in your university, so you're maybe trying to extend a little bit. But as an early career researcher, it's already, I had opportunity to collaborate with people in the university, and that's great. And I also wanted to promote a platform that some colleagues from Toulouse created during the pandemic, which is called crowdfight.org. And it's a platform that promotes scientific collaboration. So if you're looking for a collaborator, you can like type what is your research question, what skills you are looking for, and they're basically putting scientists in connection. So I think that was a great idea.
Yeah, that is cool. Check it out.
Yes, Natasha, would you please write the address in the general announcement? Maybe others will be interested as well. Please. And well, I think that one of the advantages of these virtual meetings is that, for example, for people who are not maybe, how can I say, well connected, not with people. I mean, talking about internet connections or live far away. This is a very good opportunity to listen, to know about new research, about different or research from different areas, different, don't know, to know more about things that you maybe usually don't know about in your department. Because, for example, sometimes in national conferences, you know all people who works, who works with this, who knows what. So I think that, and if you don't have money to travel, but you have the virtual meetings, you have access to other things. So it's one of the best advantages I think this can offer to us.
Yeah.
So, don't know, guys, do you?
Maybe we can do the fire questions, or maybe ask one question and then the fire questions. I don't know.
Yes, don't know, Evie, do we still have in time? Okay, because I have one question because sometimes I see that there are researchers who publish a lot in 1 year. So I wonder if you have some goals about writing papers. I don't know if you program yourself year by year, or if you do it according to your institution goals. Don't know.
Yeah, I don't have like a specific number of papers a year that I have a goal for. I guess it's more like, I mean, the main goals are like keeping funding and keeping like being sure you have projects at all sorts of different stages of development. And I think if you do that, like naturally you get a couple papers a year. I mean, I think you do really need to, I think there's a lot of strategizing about the different projects that you're doing, and you have to be like doing projects that you know are going to work. And then at the same time, doing some things that are, you think, oh, well, it might fail, but it'll give me some interesting preliminary data. And just like every year, for me, it's always field seasons, right? Every field season, we have like, okay, these projects are probably going to work. These might tell me something that I can use that might work later. And then, as long as this is, and then you have some projects that are like, this is going to be a paper. And then you have other projects where you're like, this is not publishable, but it might be useful preliminary data for a proposal. So I guess just thinking about all of the pieces and trying to keep every year kind of have a little bit of each in there, then things work out in the publishing end. I don't know.
Please, Alexis.
Yeah, thank you. I was wondering, like, if beside of all of this, you were still managing to run some experiment from time to time by yourself, like just in order to kind of keep a contact with the roots. And I mean, because it's always interesting to talk with Pierre about this, because like we know that it's super challenging to be able to continue to make some experiment.
Yeah, I work with a lot of undergraduates, actually. We have some really great undergraduates here at University of Michigan. And I feel like that's kind of my way of I don't actually like paint the wasp, but when you work with an undergraduate, it's a very like hands-on every day telling them what to do situation. So it's not like you're just like giving advice from far away and seeing what happens. So I would say, I guess that's the way that I get the closest to like, I often do that with projects that are like, they don't fit into like any big thing, but I just want to know. And then I'll be like, undergrad, would you like to do this project with me? But I mean, during the field season, I'm pretty hands-on, but probably only occasionally having to get up at dawn to census the wasps. Usually not, but still sometimes.
And so sometimes are you missing like just like sometimes you will be like, oh, I could give up on all this bureaucracy and just go outside and run my experiment from A to Z.
Well, nobody likes the bureaucracy, right?
Yeah,
and
no,
I would
of
say
course.
different people like different things. I like love the ideas and I really like writing and analyzing data. I also get a lot of pleasure out of working with wasps because it feels like, I don't know, riding a bike. You're like, wow, I have this very specific and useless skill set on like riding a bike. I can like the way you manipulate wasps, and whenever I do it, I'm like, yes, I can still handle wasps. So I guess it does bring me pleasure, but I would say I'm not one of those. I mean, I'm not one of those people who's like, my greatest love is touching wasps. So. I feel like maybe that's often more frequent with birders, because I feel like bird field work, go outside with your binoculars, you're like a man of nature, a woman of nature, like, oh, that's amazing. I don't know as often that people are like, loving, maybe people love getting out in bee suits and playing with the hive. I don't know.
I mean, I have the feeling that several of us kind of did this and liked, but I don't know.
Okay. Natasha, please.
Yeah, my question was related to your approach about doing risky experiments. From what you just said, I feel like you have a balance between you're trying to figure out like what can be impactful and maybe risky, and then have smaller projects. But if you could expand a little bit on that.
Yeah, you're right. I think that's one of the most important things is to have some things that work and then have some things that are a little bit more risky and you're not sure if they're going to work. I feel like with graduate students, like here in the US, they got a few years. So usually they start off with things that are a little bit riskier, and depending on how it goes, we're like, okay, guess you're not doing that. Let's do this thing that we know is going to work and maybe is a little less exciting, but it's definitely publishable. So yeah, I think it's a combination of like giving people the opportunity to do projects that they're really excited about and are really risky, but like knowing when to stop and be like, no, you need to have something that's really going to work now. And like I said, the riskiest projects that I really think, who knows what's going to happen, or like when I'm getting preliminary data for a grant, I often ask undergrads to do that because, any sort of experience is good experience for them. So it's not such a waste if they're doing something that turns out to bomb.
Okay,
But yeah, you can't just do safe. Yeah, you can't just do safe projects, right? I mean, it's I guess you'll be less successful, and it sure seems less fun to just do boring things. What do you think?
Yeah, I guess in this competitive world, you kind of have to take risks.
Yeah.
But I've never been a PI, so it's difficult for me to be in your shoes.
But and anyway, like I guess that it's not so possible to just make safe choice anyway, because like, I mean, I do have the feeling that 80 or 90% of the experiment are not safe anyway, because we are not able to expect really what will happen. So
Yeah.
it's like, yeah.
I mean, that's kind of true, but I guess that's an advantage for when you study the same organism for long enough. I've been studying Polistes for so long that certainly there are lots of things that go wrong that are unexpected. Like one year there was like a disease that was like went through all the wasps and killed them all. And I'm like, oh, Jesus, like the first time in a very long time that's ever happened. But on the other hand, if you've been studying the same organism for long enough, you get a better like feel for what's risky and what's not risky. So like, you know, that's an advantage the further you get in your career. And, you know, talking to your advisors, they probably have like an instinct, like, I can't figure out why, but my instinct is that's just not great. And you will develop that instinct too.
Yeah. So I would like to going back a little bit about your interaction with prospective students. And I would like to ask you, what is one thing that you really enjoy in a prospective student? I mean, talking about the email, a cover letter, now the interview.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they you got to send an email to and you say in the email it should be not super long, but it should say like, this is who I am, brief introduction. This is what I'm interested in doing and why I'm contacting you. And then you attach a resume or something like that. And you're most likely to get a response to get if the reason that you're contacting someone is very clear. Sometimes I get emails that are just like, hey, I've been studying turtles. I want to study migration, so I'm getting in touch with you. And you're like, what? That's an extreme example, but seriously, there are a lot of very like super general emails like, I like behavior, so I'm contacting you, which is fine. But if you're getting like 100 letters, you're like, the person who's just interested in behavior gets maybe ignored. So the more you can make the case, you don't have to, like in my case, you don't have to have studied wasps. You don't even have to have studied insects, but you need to you don't need to have studied anything that I study, but you need to show that you understand what I study and you've thought about it and you've thought about why you might want to work in my lab. And then I look at people's resumes and I talk to a few of them. And when I talk to them, I'm always asked them to talk about their previous research. And I want to hear that I want to hear them describe their research and that they understand what they did, they understand why it's interesting, and they've thought about some implications of it. You know, it's like not as good if you're just like, I pipetted some things and we found X, and it shows. You really want to see that the student has thought about what they were doing and like we're really engaged in it. You know, you ask why they're interested in going to grad school. That's a hard question, but like bad answers would be like, well, I really like school, so I'm just going to keep going to school. You know, better answers would have something to do with the research you did and why it was like interesting and fulfilling and like where you see yourself in the future and how grad school is going to help you get there. Yeah, I would say that that's like the process that, you know, you need to write that good letter. When you talk to the PI, you need to have like thought about why you're interested in working in that lab and really thought carefully about your undergraduate research. And it's always a bonus to read, if you're going to talk with a potential mentor, it's always a bonus to have read some of their papers. I'm not expecting you to have read a lot of them, but if you've read a couple and you have some thoughts about them, it shows that you are sincerely interested and you kind of know what you're getting into. I would say for prospective students, I really want to know that they understand what they're getting into. That's maybe the most important thing, because you guys know grad school is awesome and then also really hard and really different from undergrad. And we want to be sure that students really know that it is different and that they're excited about what grad school is. They're not just like thinking, oh, I'm going to keep going to school and see what happens.
Yes, I think those are very good tips, very good comments, because I think sometimes when you finish your baccalaureate and you are looking for something, maybe you are struggling with what to write exactly. You Google what to write on a cover on a letter, and you found tons of information, tons of discussions about a mail should be long, a mail should be short, and focus, and a lot of things. But I think that it's very nice to listen this from a professor, because I mean you choose students. So talking about this, I have one question Alexis?
Kenzie, I think we can do the fire questions now
Yeah, that's what
because
I
there
was
is
about to
only
say.
5
Yeah.
minutes left.
Okay, well, so maybe in the Discord I can ask my question. So let me start with the fire questions. These are a set of questions with single word phrase answers that can be, well, that I will ask. So the first one, which is your favorite model species?
Callistes wasps, of course.
Yes. Your favorite field site?
State park bathrooms. That's where we go.
And your favorite part about your daily PI routine, Professor?
I'm working with students, right? They're so enthusiastic and not jaded, and it's pretty exciting.
Your favorite journal for reading papers?
Oh God, I can't choose just one. It's gonna be difficult. I like the behavior journals. I won't say which one is my favorite, but there's a whole set of great behavior journals that are, that have really good work. And they're not like trying to spin it too fancy yet. So.
And for submitting papers?
There's not just one. I mean, I don't know. Does anyone give you an answer that there's one journal that they submit their papers to?
You all say Nature.
Depends on the paper, 100%.
And lastly, one paper that inspired you recently?
Well, I like the paper about bumblebees